I love how this kind of all came together as well, because whenever I do these live events, I oftentimes like to talk about just like the power of LinkedIn, having this conversation with people from your past that like you had some sort of connection to.
I think I was in New York with Sachi, and then you were in LA with Sachi. And my bet is that we met when I would occasionally come out to LA to work on a pitch. So I'm guessing that it was during a pitch of some kind that we
Yeah.
met and connected,
Yeah.
or maybe it was something else, who knows? But then it was like years later and in different sorts of roles that we pop up on each other's LinkedIn algorithms again.
Yeah, LinkedIn algorithms and whatever LinkedIn's doing with that situation is anybody's best guess. Let me ask you this, because Tim, we both came from like the ad space. So like, how did you get into doing workshops?
Yeah, because I've got this weird background of several different things. So I started off as a copywriter, and then I was a creative director when I was at Saatchi. And then it was actually during that time, if you recall, because this was a while ago, digital was really roiling the industry. Like for a while, it had just been, okay, we're going to build websites. But all of a sudden, social was becoming a bigger thing. It was becoming more obvious that this was a big deal. And I got involved with a company, a Swedish company called Hyper Island. And Hyper Island is a school in Sweden and had begun something called executive programs, where we worked with executives and leadership teams at agencies as well as main brands, and essentially ran most of the time. We would run like a 3-day workshop, what we called a master class, which helped individuals and businesses adapt to the future, whatever that future might be. And the whole way that we did that was through leveraging facilitation. And I was typically there as a speaker, right? And then we would also have facilitators who were the ones that were in charge of guiding the entire group through the journey. But the speakers were involved in that too. So it wasn't just us talking the whole time. It became much more workshop oriented. And then in some cases, I became one of the facilitators who guided the whole thing. So that was how I got that started. And then I worked with that organization for about 10 years total, but
Yeah.
2 years full time. And so I went from Saatchi to there full time. And then from there, I went to RPA, where I was part of the executive team, and I was the chief marketing and innovation officer. That's where our mutual friend Laura Small
Yeah.
is there now. And she's the chief people officer there. And so we were on the executive team together, and I like to say that my role there was in charge of marketing and innovation in an ad agency, which also meant I was kind of in charge of nothing. All I could do was help facilitate all the other people to help wrangle from a marketing perspective, whether that was new business or thought leadership or whatever that might look like, or innovative ideas. How do we evolve to be what our clients need us to be before the clients even know that's what they need? And so I continued using facilitation through that point. And at several instances where people would ask, how you got that introduction, like, what's your superpower?
Yeah.
My superpower was always workshops. If you gave me 3 minutes notice, we could put together a workshop based on the experience. Cause by that point I've been doing it for like 15 years so just in my head, I understand, what do we want our desired outcomes to be? How am I going to work back from that? What are some interesting exercises we could do? And how will I guide the group through to achieve those outcomes? And so when I wanted to start my own company, I was originally focusing it on creativity exercises, like strengthening creativity. And that's a whole different story, but essentially, I don't think it's urgent enough. Everybody was interested in it, but it wasn't urgent enough.
Yeah.
And then I pivoted a little bit to think about, how can I focus on what is the most valuable things? And even when I was just focusing it on creativity, it was still focused on facilitation as my delivery mechanism. So I just leaned into that and then started on LinkedIn building up a stronger network of people that were passionate about facilitation. And then it's grown from there.
It's interesting, and I'll get into Tim's like full introduction and everything, but been privy to attend a number of workshops and meetings as well that just like are total time sucks. So when I saw that this is like your superpower, which what a great superpower. I was like, I feel like there's learnings that I can take, from, let's call it workshop, or even just like from a meeting perspective, just to make things more effective. Shoot, I'm even thinking like how this potentially applies to, how I'm running my live events. And I think what I got from what you were just saying right now is that I think in terms of like your pivot, in terms of your business's objective, is the words that keep fluttering around in my head, kind of business acumen. Because I think for me, just understanding in my earlier career, like you think that your job is to do whatever the job that you're hired for. The reality is that like I think for the people that rise up in the ranks, if that's your goal or objective, or if your intention is that to actually go out and work independently, I think it really comes down to thinking like, how am I delivering against the larger organization and company-wide goals? How does my specific task play into that? So to your point around high return on investment, like workshops and the immediacy of it, I think that really ties in very clearly and directly to larger business goals and objectives and progress, whatever that means.
I think you're smart to think about that sort of thing, and a lot of people don't. And weirdly, a lot of companies don't tell people what their larger business goals are. They aren't clear about these are the metrics that are important to the organization, and we'd love to hear your thoughts of how your role can help drive that. And much less our clients' businesses. Like we have in advertising, what's cool is you get to understand both how an agency works, but then you also understand how all of your clients work and what's different about them and all that.
Yeah.
It makes us very smart very quickly because we get a lot of experience across a wide range of industries to be able to
Loved working in
understand it.
that space, I got to tell you. So
Yeah.
I hear you guys. So let's jump into it. Tim is the founder and crusher of soul crushers at Let's Lightbulb, a consultancy that specializes in high ROI workshops and offsites for leadership teams. He's a regular speaker at events around the globe, and he also helps teams get more done and have more fun by training the superpower of facilitation. In fact, he's passionate at solving our big topic for today, making sure workshops don't suck. I ran 2 different surveys in 2 different LinkedIn groups, and what the question that I asked is, when you're asked to participate in a workshop at work, what's your first reaction? The options I gave were great, I hope it's hands-on. 2, depends on who's running it. 3, another one. And 4, I didn't see the invite. So I feel like we could have a little bit of fun with this. And what I found very interesting, because amongst these 2 different groups, the breakdown of the responses was consistent in both responses, and in total there were about 400 people that responded to this. In both groups, 40 to 45% of people actually commented it depends who's running it. And you know what that speaks to? Like, I mean, sorry guys, I curse, but I'm like, if you're a shitty facilitator, people don't want to go to your events. People don't want to waste their time. And I think that's natural. Supports that perspective is the second most popular answer was, great, I hope it's hands-on. So like either people are like, I've been burned before, I don't know what this is going to be like. And then secondarily, like, hey, I'm really looking forward to it. Like, I'm hoping that somebody will potentially take into consideration my opinion, whatever. So it's like, I
Yeah.
actually really like that perspective. And then third in both categories, both for 20%, another one, and I didn't see the invite, was the dead last in both of them. So Tim, what's your take on the results? Does it track with what you find?
It really does. Yeah, it really does. I thought it was fascinating, and I saw it when you put it out live. My vote is in there someplace too, and I think
What did you say? Did you say depends on who's running it?
I probably did. I don't remember. I certainly wouldn't have picked the bottom 2, so
Yeah.
I might have put hands-on because I'm into workshops. And I think that does track. The interesting thing with a workshop is you're fundamentally focused on a group. And so when you bring a group together, that group is going to be made up of diverse opinions. And since you asked that same thing to 2 different groups and got a similar breakdown, my bet is that most groups that you bring together work similarly. Probably half the people want to be there, or let's call it 25% of the people are excited to be there. 25% are skeptical, but cool. And you probably have 25% that I just realized my math was horrible on that. So ignore my
You know what? You're
percentages.
you're you're
But
you're
you know
not
what I
graded
mean?
on your math.
Actually, really, they've been burned by workshops before. They're
Yeah.
skeptical. They're like, whatever. I don't think
Me,
this is there.
I'm the
Yeah.
skeptic. I'm fully the skeptic.
And what when you've been why are you skeptical? So tell me a little bit about some of the bad experiences you've had.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I've had a good experience, honestly.
Really?
Yeah, and the reason
Wow.
I say this is that, like, I think, and this is why I'm kinda interested in this conversation too, is, like, I think there's something to be said about the unique perspective also about having somebody completely devoid of the office politics or the organizational politics coming in and right. So I'm projecting a thing, but meaning, like, the reason I'm saying that is I anticipate that I've been there. You feel like you know what your boss wants to happen, like the politics, and you know what like I feel like there's a lack of opportunity to be fully honest
Mm.
and contribute your perspectives. And it's like, I honestly, I'm the annoying one when I was in school and college back in the day, like, I'd be the participator. So you would tell me you're inviting me to like a workshop. I'm like, I want to participate. Like, let's do this. And then it falls short of that. So I also realize that, like, I am a little bit more extroverted. So maybe it's like, hey, Jackie, other people need their turn as well. It's felt political. It's felt like people have an objective before getting into it that they want to
Mm.
accomplish, as opposed to the workshop leading the outcome. And so those are my initial kind of concerns. And if I may, we actually have some comments in the chat. So Sadia said, I don't find them dynamic enough. We end up losing most people and difficult to get everybody inputs. And then Tanya, I recently did some training as a design thinking facilitator about what was possible as a facilitator and how to orchestrate creative results. But most of my experience of going to workshops for work has been pretty grim. So, hey Tim,
Yeah.
like,
I
help
think
us fix
those
this.
are it goes right into this notion of it depends who's running it. And I do think I've seen bad facilitators, and a lot of times there are a lot of mistakes you can make, right, when it comes to facilitation. You can be low on energy that you lose the group right away. You can actually be paying too much attention to what the group says they think rather than paying attention to what the group needs. And that's a pretty high level dynamic to get to as a facilitator, because facilitation is made up of a lot of different things. And I actually had a post like kick off on LinkedIn. If anybody clicks my LinkedIn profile, you can see it if you scroll down to, what is it, featured? It's up there. And it's an iceberg graphic of what people know facilitators for, which is mostly workshop exercises and sticky notes. And that's what they think it all is. And then there's all the stuff below that that is really, really important. And that takes a lot of time. It can't be taught quickly. It's really something you learn by doing it, by paying attention. And I'm sure that I still stumble and fall on a lot of that stuff constantly, because there are a lot of moving pieces to what this is. But going back to what you started with, Jackie, about that you don't feel like you can be honest, that is actually one of the biggest, most important things that a facilitator, a
Want to be
facilitator,
honest, I promise you, I want
yeah.
to be, but it's
No, but it's one of the key things that a facilitator needs to do at the beginning is create a sense of psychological safety in the group. And it's almost always the exercises are designed to do that. And when it doesn't happen, it's usually because the group has said, no, we don't have enough time for that. We want to jump right in. And they think that that part is fluffy and not important. And so it has to be run in a way where leaders, especially, will swallow it, where it doesn't feel like, oh my God, this is going so slow and I know all this. And what's funny is they say they know all this. Like, always, participants are like, yeah, we know all this. And yet we don't, if we aren't explicit about saying that this is a place where we want to hear all voices, and we care about what Jackie thinks, and we care about what Tim thinks, and we care about what Lisa thinks, and we care about everybody that is here. The reason you are in the room is your voice is important. And there is no answer yet. We are here to find the answer, and that's why. And we need to set up those expectations. And there are a lot of exercises and approaches that you can do to do that. Do it quickly and make it land. But what does sometimes happen is people feel the pressure to skip that, or maybe they don't know to do that, and they jump right into the exercises themselves. And those exercises start to fall apart. I was taught it's called establishing the room. that, and this works whether or not the room is virtual or whether the room is like a literal room that we are in. We want to establish the room and figure out how are we going to engage with each other today and what is that going to look like. And I have just found that the trick is, because there are so many ways to do this, the trick is to do it in service of the outcomes. So
Yeah.
from the get-go, we are focused on those outcomes, but we want to be able to, and some facilitators will do it in more of an icebreaker kind of a way that I love them. See, I love workshops, so I love all kinds of them, and I don't mind the touchy-feely stuff. I actually think it's really fun. But because my focus is on senior leaders and executives, I have noticed that they have a really hard time swallowing that, and they've got this really low threshold actually for touchy-feely stuff. So you
Yeah.
have to go in quickly saying, so this is our outcome, and in order to get to that outcome, what we want to do is we want to set a contract up for this is a
Wait, but
contract
here,
we're going to
can
hold
I
ourselves together
can I
for.
ask real quick
Yeah.
though? Because it's like you're like, okay, we're like we're planning for an outcome and everything, or like we're asking for an outcome. I guess I anticipate that there's some pre work in terms of figuring out what that outcome even is. So can you talk about that? Because
Yeah, I think that's fair. There are a
maybe here
number of
can
ways.
we? Sorry, I realize can we maybe, because I feel like maybe can we, while we're talking through something, like let's make up like a fictitious like product and everything that like it's like, because I feel like that will conceptualize it, at least for me it will help, so hopefully for other people. So maybe maybe we're talking about like maybe I don't know what's something that maybe we could, like a new Lego set or something.
Okay. So, and what about the new Lego set? We're bringing it to market?
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, or maybe it's what it is. I mean, there's any number of things, and I think you can look at this through the same lens you would look at a meeting. You don't call a meeting about the Lego set. You call a meeting about something about the Lego set, right? Like we're going to talk about the marketing plan, or we're going to talk about what the new Lego set should be, or understanding our target audience for this new Lego set. There's any number of things of what that could be. And yes, there is often breakdown. This happens in meetings all the time too, where somebody says to their executive assistant, "Oh, let's set up a meeting and let's have the whole team get together and we're going to talk about the Lego set." And nobody is really sure what about the Lego set we're going to talk about, right?
You're like, are we talking about
Yeah,
the P&L, or are we talking about the design, or are we talking about the tagline, or are we
right.
talking about the promotion plan?
So certainly that happens, but let's assume that we've got a facilitator involved, whether they're an external facilitator or an internal facilitator. And it's worth saying just for a second that there's a whole spectrum of, this could be a day-to-day internal meeting, in which case you're probably not going to hire an external facilitator to come in and run that. That would be cost prohibitive. But we train people all the time to be internal facilitators. So somebody's role may be to facilitate this meeting, or it could be a workshop that is just like a 2-hour thing that still might be internal, or it might be a full day or a half day or a multi-day workshop. Somebody mentioned the design sprint earlier, that is a 5-day workshop with a very specific structure that has very specific outcomes associated with it. One of the first things any facilitator needs to do is figure out what our desired outcomes are and work back from that. And those desired outcomes could be many different things. And even when we talk about workshops, we tend to use that word really broadly, and a lot of people don't know what it means, or don't define what it means, I should say. And I think there are really like 4 different types of workshops based on the type of outcomes you're going for. In some cases, it's a learning outcome. The point is we just want to learn about some topic, but we want to do it in a hands-on way. In that case, the facilitator has learning objectives or learning outcomes that we're building this process for. It might be soft outcomes, which is like team building, or like we just want this team to feel bonded. That happens a lot. Or we want everybody to feel heard. There's a lot of aspects like that. And a lot of workshops are built around team building.
Mhm.
That's a really powerful outcome. But it's what it's like soft skills, like, so we call it soft outcomes. There is exploratory outcomes, which is we don't know what we're looking for. We just want to look around it. And like a user journey or a customer journey might be that, or a SWOT analysis. We're just going to look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats about something. That could be exploratory. And then the last one, and this design sprint is an example of this. And when I talk about high ROI workshops, this is what I'm talking about, is what we call a hard outcome, which is we have a challenge and we want to come up with an answer and an action plan that runs off of that. Not every workshop needs to or is that, but some are. And I think it helps to be really clear about what those are as we go through them. And then of course there are just meetings, right? Which is there's a meeting and those might be one of those four things at a smaller scale.
And so like, okay, so let's say, okay, with our, example, like this new Lego set and everything. So like the objective for a high ROI workshop with like, what would be like a potential challenge that we're like trying to figure out with this, fictitious thing?
So in one of the interesting things is as I do these, I try to focus the group on what is the most valuable challenge out of this, because there are a lot of challenges we might have to solve. So if we think about what is the most valuable challenge, that becomes an exercise in itself that we are collaboratively going to figure out. And if we're using this example of the Lego set, a couple things just off the, I'm just riffing on this.
Yeah.
I may do it poorly, but it may be how can we price this for Lego set so that we have the highest profit margins off of it? It might be a pricing exercise. We might not know what it is yet. Like we might be looking for that opportunity of what it is. We might want to think about who the target market is. This a collectible Lego set? Is this a mass market Lego set? I'm going to guess they've got a lot of these just based on me
Yeah.
as a Lego
No,
consumer.
absolutely. No, it's like it's probably sitting in like one of their kind of like product line verticals and everything, but maybe determining like, hey, we could go a few different ways with this and like
Right.
which is it
Or
because it'll have
we might
different
be brainstorming
objectives.
a whole new vertical, right? Like
Yeah.
they've got the collector version or whatever. And that might be a really valuable thing to explore, for instance, in the Lego universe, is just to think about. So these are successful ones we have. What's a whole new area we haven't even thought about? Like we could explore something the way that Pokemon cards are really limited edition. Like you might open up the Lego box and not know which version you're going to get. And that could
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
whole new place to go because people might buy multiple copies or they might run out on the off chance that they'll get the gold version or whatever that might be. Those become things that we can then talk about and figure out. And then what we try to do is then align on those options. And a facilitator will guide people through this process that kind of looks like a diamond, where the first thing we want to do is we want to define what the problem is tightly, and then we want to go, it's convergent and divergent thinking, which is a very common way of thinking about it, right? So we've converged on the challenge. Now
Yep.
we want to diverge on a lot of different options, think of as many potential solutions as possible, and then we want to converge again on what we think is the best solution to that. And then we actually want to run through that again, where we want to then think about how are we going to execute that particular solution.
And can I back up a little bit? So like how are you like determining the most valuable challenge?
That becomes a process. There are a lot of ways to get there, to be perfectly honest. So it becomes a process through which the facilitator can choose any number of options in terms of how they want to solve it. I have a very specific process when I talk about the high ROI workshops that I run is. And again, we're trying to solve very, very big problems. So this wouldn't be the sort of thing that you would just do for a meeting or for a 2-hour workshop. But what the process I use there is something I call a value score. And the value score has three components of it. It's got an emotional score, which is we want to evaluate, hey, if we solve this challenge, how is that going to affect emotionally this team? Is it going to make life easier? Are we going to be happy? Or does it not really affect anything? It's like that benefits other people, but not us. Like there's always a spectrum there. And then there's an ecosystem score, which is to think about how does solving this one thing end up making a lot of other things better? And the reason to focus on this is because oftentimes we focus on symptoms, not something bigger. And so something with a stronger ecosystem score will affect a lot of other things. And if we don't see it affecting other things, we're probably too far down on the value ladder for what we're trying to solve. It's a symptom, not the meaty, most valuable challenge. And then the final component of that is a monetary score. We actually try to put a dollar value on what we think solving this challenge will be worth to the organization, the team, the company whatever it is. And then we combine those. And the way that I go about doing that one is independent anonymous polling. And there's a specific reason to this, because there's actually a psychological, or I don't know if psychological is the right word. I'm probably using the wrong word. Scientifically proven. Let's just go with
I mean,
scientific.
psychology is scientific, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That was just the word that came out of my mouth. But I think it is a scientifically proven effect, which is the best one is the jelly bean thing. You've seen those things where it's like they ask people to guess how many
Yes.
jelly beans are in this jar. And in general, my guess is likely to be wrong and your guess is likely to be wrong. But the average of all of our guesses, especially if you are able to remove the lowest and the highest and then average them out, is almost always the closer than any one person's guess to the real thing. We are better as a group at estimating, but we can't do it if we are influenced by other people. So for instance, if I went around the room and I said, "Okay, Miss CEO, what do you think first?" And the CEO says,
never the CEO first, never. Yeah.
But whoever, if anybody anchors that by saying, "Oh, I think it's worth $50 million," well, everybody else is going to automatically anchor around that. You have to have an individual where nobody else knows what anybody else says. So I do that across all three of those, and it's easiest just to use a tool. Mentimeter is a great one that has a scale that you can use to be able to do this sort of thing that averages it out. And then that score has 3 points. For a simpler workshop, I wouldn't go as detailed as that, but that is to figure out what is truly the most valuable thing that we can focus on, right? A simpler version.
Are different people weighted differently, or is like
No,
everybody's equal?
no, everybody's equal in
Cool.
that sense.
Cool. Yeah.
A simpler version is just dot voting, and this will be a very common one, which is everybody gets like 5 dots, and we've got a bunch of ideas on the wall, and we use the dots basically to heat map the same way that you would on a website. Like a heat map will show where people's mouse tends to be on the website.
Yeah.
Where are they looking, right? And it's kind of similar. We might end up with 50 ideas, but we can't vote on all 50 ideas or run that value score equation.
Yeah,
on
we
all
have to
50 ideas.
prioritize.
We've got to narrow it down. But at the same time, a popular vote is also a very bad way to make a decision. It's like shows you what's the least disliked as opposed to the best actual option to choose. And so that heat mapping approach goes really far. A lot of times people will do heat mapping first, which is let's get a sense of what is here, and then give people a chance to vote for the one they think is really, out of the top heat mapped ones, which one do you want to throw your weight around? These always work best the more anonymous it is. It is very difficult to do that in a room unless you're using technology combined with it, because I can see where other people have put their dots, and versus one of the benefits and there are benefits to doing virtual workshops, is if you're doing this on Miro or Mural or a platform like that, they've made voting by default anonymous until it's revealed. So you don't know what everybody else is voting for. That is very, very useful to be able to do that. You can hack it live. There are ways to be able to do that, like ask people to commit to their vote and then put their vote up, as opposed to, just anything that leads the witness is bad. And we don't want that. There's a lot of other stuff that we do to make sure every individual voices are heard without being unfairly influenced by what everybody else is saying.
Yeah. I'm looking at a comment from Arvid in the chat. It came earlier, but I guess he was mentioning, it's like, from your perspective, does this, because here's the comment. So promote interaction and incorporate varied teaching methodology and encourage interaction and set a positive tone after the workshop. Evaluate by using feedback to improve the next workshop. So yeah, I agree with that. So do you feel like these methods ultimately promote interaction, varied kind of methods and everything? Do you feel like ultimately you suss out like the best solution to move forward with whatever the objective is?
I think you do. And the point is not to overthink stuff and not to underthink stuff, but like appropriately think it. That's the goal, in my opinion, of any workshop. Is most corporate environments will tend to spin out and overthink something. But in fairness, a lot of workshops try to solve it so fast that they actually underthink it. They're like, Which one do we like? Let's all vote. Okay, that one. I think that does a disservice as well. And it's really important to make sure that we do talk it through, we debate it, we take these ideas that we like and we weight them. I am a big believer that action always wins. So what we want to do is we want to get the group aligned on whatever that idea is and then start taking action in it. And that way we can learn, we can iterate, we can change course. It doesn't mean we're stuck because we decided it in a workshop. It doesn't mean we're stuck on it forever. We probably have 3 or 4 backup examples as well, but it gives us clarity of what we're pursuing first and how we're going to go about it and aligning the team on what that is. And it should have this bias towards action. I think that's what's most important, rather than trying to hold it to an unreasonable bar, which is for sure it's going to work out of the get-go, because we don't know that. But I've been part of projects that went on for 6 months to 12 months to 18 months
Yeah.
that then didn't work when they launched. Like you still have that problem once you launch. You just have to get it out.
Yeah, well, and sometimes also from the point of like, let's say from origination to ultimately the execution, it's like a lot of times, sometimes these things change or different priorities become apparent or new opportunities and what. So
Yeah.
I've been in there where I think credit to the last company I was at, we did these things called most important tasks that like ultimately as an organization, it was made very clear. It's like, hey, this is number one. Like there would only be 4 organizationally as well, and it's like ultimately, like with new information, like say came in quarterly or whatever it may be, or new opportunities, like we would readjust like the priority. So it's like hit the most important task first, and everything else we'll figure it out.
That's a great structure that the MIT's, I believe, is part of a structure called OKRs, which is a pretty well known, though not every company does something different, but
Their version, yeah.
yeah. And so with the objectives and key results, you start off at the top of defining what are our desired outcomes and then what is going to get us there, and everything just keeps moving all the way down. It's like a funnel
Yeah.
that goes,
And
now
eventually
what
those bottom
specifically do
things
I
like
need to
never
do
happen.
today?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so I have some little factoids that that I found online that like people were saying that what was it 78% of workshop attendees report better team collaboration after workshops, which is kind of cool. Okay, so let's say we defined what the problem is, we came up with the solution and everything through some of these different methodologies and ways that people can go about it. What's the part of actually executing on whatever's decided then? Like, is that decided in the workshop? Is it like, because another factoid I have here is that like, what was it 54% of workers, and granted this is a meetings factoid, but leave meetings without knowing what to do next. And so like, I think if you invest all this time, and I'm not sure how long like the workshops are that you're having with the executives, 1-2 days a week. A week sounds like a lot to ask from an executive team, but I think you ultimately want to create something that like there's action from afterwards. So like,
Yeah.
what's that
Well,
look like?
so there's a lot to unpack there. Let me take this one part for a second, which is the week is a lot to ask for an executive team. It is, which is why we try to be sure that we're solving the most valuable challenge possible. And a lot of these things legitimately could be worth millions of dollars to the company. It depends on the size of the company, right? A small business like mine, it's not going to be worth millions of dollars.
But it could be,
Yeah, go
substantial
to a
for you,
P&G
whatever.
or even an ad agency or something like that, and we're talking about things that have a huge impact. Is that worth having the team focus for a week? Yeah, I think it is, especially when it's going to speed up the quality of decision making, and the execution of that literally by months. And the design sprint framework, which again was mentioned earlier, is a similar kind of thing about literally launching a product and testing it with real people in a week. Otherwise, we know how long it takes to launch that product. It takes months if we just do it by ourselves without this kind of framework. And that is where the power of this lies. That's for that kind of workshop. For other kinds of workshops, or just a day-to-day meeting, it's going to be different. And it's really, I'm trying to explain this without potentially confusing anybody who's watching, but it just depends on what we're trying to accomplish. We can come up with some stuff in a matter of hours and have a very powerful workshop that only lasted 2 hours. but the ask has to be smaller of what we're trying to accomplish then. Or we could do a meeting, and the goal of this meeting is going to be to align around some particular question that we have. And we could do that in a reasonable amount of time. The stuff that you talk about how do we make sure that we know what to do with it afterwards, it depends on the scale of that challenge, right? If the goal of that meeting, to use the Lego example, is to come up with the name of this Lego set, all we have to do is decide it. There's no further work to be done, right? It's self-contained.
Yeah, yeah.
If the goal is what we need to do is figure out how to increase our profit margins per Lego set by 20%, we're probably going to end up with a more complex
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
that requires the rest of the organization then to understand what we did and how that happens. So let's talk about that type of thing for a second, because with that type of program, what a lot of people will try to do in workshops is come up with an action plan. And the action plan starts to fall apart because it is decided by the people that are in the room, but it needs to be implemented by people who are not in the room.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is where it starts to fall apart. And what I recommend doing is creating an alignment plan instead. I'm a big believer in servant leadership, that the role of a leader is to help basically block and tackle and make it as easy as possible for the rest of the team to bring their brilliant selves to it. And servant leadership has a lot in common with facilitation because we are the guides. We are meant to be serving the team. And so we believe that the rest of the team is going to figure out how to achieve this amazing goal and run with it. What we have done at an executive level is figure out what that goal is and giving clarity around it so they have clear marching orders. Now what we need them to do is, because they weren't in the room when we discussed the other 50 possible options, they weren't in the room when we saw the ups and downs and did this
Yeah.
whole exploration, we need to somehow communicate that to them. And I like to express it almost like a micro marketing campaign, an internal marketing campaign, to get people aligned
Yeah. The
on what the
buy-in.
group decided. Yeah, so they're
Yeah.
bought in. And that becomes the output of the workshop, right? What we want to do is we've now decided it, and the output now is this little bit of a campaign, and it can come out in lots of different ways. My simplest thing is what I call the slide to rule them all. It's like a one slide explanation that if anybody just printed that out and put it on their desk, they would be clear. Okay, I know how project management can contribute to this. I know how my role can contribute to this. I know how me as a UX designer, I can add to this goal. It becomes clear to everybody what we're going to do now. That is the easiest way, because if what we try to do is we try to solve every version, as soon as we give it to them and it becomes one more project on their desk and they don't know why
Yeah.
this is what we've asked them to do, they deprioritize it, and the executive team gets busy with everything else, and then it all loses
And then like,
steam.
where is this? Like a month later, and it's like,
Yep.
huh, what? I do want to just confirm that Tim is also doing an additional workshop around this. HighROIworkshops.com is also where you can find Tim and also join that workshop. And for
I should
anybody,
clarify, because I actually did a post about this that got a lot of engagement.
well, let's hear it.
I call it a free training because it's more of a webinar than it is a workshop. It's not going to be an interactive workshop. It's going to be like an hour training, but
Okay, perfect.
it's going to be a lot more linear than our conversation today in terms of literally showing people how to go through and do this. So if the topic is of interest, check that out and register there, and it's
Yeah.
free.
I do think that there's applications to some of these methodologies to just general day-to-day meetings, because when I was in corporate, the amount of meetings that I would go into that were like busting at the seam was with too many people and felt insignificant, or I wouldn't even say wasteful, but like it was just people telling you stuff. It wasn't necessarily participatory. So are there learnings from workshops that you can leverage into meetings that make meetings worth people's time?
I totally think so. They all happen on the spectrum, as I talked about earlier. And I do believe the big aspect is making sure that somebody is facilitating that meeting. And I have said this in multiple places over the years. I'm a big believer that it's a great role for like a mid-level person within an organization. We have our own issues with AI and the dearth of entry-level positions at the moment. That's going to be a big challenge for us. But we also have a problem for as people start to move up, they're in the meeting and they deserve to be in the meeting, and they would feel bad if they weren't in the meeting. But I'm not sure what their role is when then we also have 10 levels above them. And I think we've all been in those meetings where there are 25 people in this meeting and 3 people do all the talking. So
Yes.
why are the other 21 here? Are their voices not important? All of that. And I think most people would say that no, their voices are important. Where we have failed is we didn't give any structure to that meeting. And if we empower the mid-level person, especially, it could be anybody, by the way, but I think especially if you empower a mid-level person to facilitate the meeting, it puts them in a leadership role where they are leading the leaders, where they are a servant leader. Their job is to help all the strong extrovert voices that are in the room, as well as the introvert voices who maybe aren't going to be heard without
Yes.
them. Their job is to make sure that everybody gets heard and that this meeting lands on its desired outcome. They are the ones thinking about how the meeting works. And because they're thinking about it, it's a gift to everybody else that they don't have to think about it. They don't
Yeah.
have to worry
Just
about
show
it.
up. Just
They
show
just
up.
show
I
up
got it.
and you'll be guided through this and we will get there and everybody will feel more energy because it doesn't feel like that was a wasted hour of our time. It felt productive. And a lot of people, when they experience it, they don't realize, oh, we were just facilitated. It just felt like, oh, that was a good meeting. That was a productive meeting. But it tends to be more clear about how we are going to have people participate, what we're looking to get out of everybody in the room, and what our desired outcomes are. And I think it's important rather than just writing an agenda that we design that process that we're going through, and it doesn't take long. When I train people on this process, and I do this with mid-level teams a lot, I train them to simply give 5 or 10 minutes of thought of this before the meeting. If we just did that, it's going to come out so much better because we understand who is in the room. Are there people that don't need to be there? Are the people going to be quiet? What do we know about the different players that are in the room? What is our outcome and what is our plan to achieve that outcome? And it's one of those, it's simple but not easy to do, right? Like it's
Yeah.
simple when we talk about it, but it does take practice. It does require some confidence to be able to go out there and facilitate senior leaders who, if they even get a whiff that nobody else is running this meeting, they will try to grab it from you,
Yeah.
right?
You have to like, you're like, no, I'm here.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah,
you need
you
to
have
be
to own that
known.
meeting, you have to
Yeah.
own the room from the get-go, and it really is, "Welcome, everybody. I want you to know this is what we're going to achieve today, and this is how we're going to do it," and then the executives breathe a sigh of relief. They go, "Oh, somebody's got this under control. Thank God we have somebody smart leading this meeting,"
Yeah.
because they're so used to so many of them being bad, and they'll jump in and be like, "I think we should do it this way, but I think we should do it this way," and then we spend 25 minutes of a 30-minute meeting talking about how we're going to run the meeting. I've been through so many of those. And then you just have to schedule another meeting to talk about the meeting you just had. That's what we're trying to break. And just having somebody in that facilitator role and training them to be able to do that is really, really powerful.
Well, let me ask you this. So, I did have somebody reach out to me that they're not able to join live, but they did ask me. They're like, they're a newer facilitator, and they were asking they were looking for insights in terms of like, do they need to potentially do any like, was it pre-selling ahead of like the workshop and to get some initial buy-in from some of these key people so that they know that they're handled. What kind of pre-work does somebody need to do in advance of the workshop to command the room on some
Yeah.
level to actually make sure that like people are, because let's be honest, it's like the work isn't just happening in the meeting. It's
A lot. Again, it depends on the size and the scope of the meeting.
yeah.
This is why facilitation is a skill that is built up. It isn't the sort of thing that people can just turn on. But there's a lot. Some of the tactics that you can use to be able to do that are simply establishing expectations ahead of time. Communication goes really far. I will say, especially if you're talking with senior leaders, it is very, very, very often that you will put together an email or several emails, and then you'll show up at the meeting and they will have not read them. So expect that some people may have read them, but you shared them and then reiterated at the beginning. And I think it is very important to set, somebody has expressed it this way, set and get expectations at the beginning of a meeting, which is, these are the expectations. If I'm the facilitator, this is what I expect out of the group. Now, group, what do you expect out of each other? That's easier to do in a bigger workshop than it is in a day-to-day meeting that has to be handled differently. But in the context of a workshop, it's kind of going back to what we talked about at the beginning of our conversation. This is about how you kick that off and how you establish psychological safety in the room, how we define how we're going to work together. It does not have to be a long thing. This can be a 5 or 10 minute exercise, or it can be something you spend half an hour or 45 minutes on if it's really important to the group. That goes a long way. I think setting the expectations that this is going to be a facilitated experience is really good. If we know, because we know who the players are, that we need to get in front of them and help them feel some co-ownership in what we're about to go through from a process standpoint, then do that. I've definitely had to do that before, where I want to make sure these 3 people are
There's
helping
those people.
support.
Yeah.
And sometimes a little hack that I will often use is I like to deputize certain participants, especially if I think they're going to be a troublemaker potentially, but not always. Just if you're ever in a workshop with me and I deputize you, it doesn't mean I think you're a troublemaker. I might mean that I think you're going to be helpful for this, but I do it both ways, which is, if I'm worried that they might try to pull it this way, if you put them in charge of something, and a really good one is, I'm going to be focused on the activities we're doing and what the ideas are. I will sometimes miss, like, paying attention to the people in the room and whether or not anybody seems to be more quiet or skeptical about an idea. So what I will sometimes do is say, can you be paying attention? And if you think somebody seems to be skeptical but isn't sharing, I want you to call them or let me know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want them to call them out. I want them to let me know so that I can be sure and pull them in to that. And a lot of people really like that role, and it is really valuable. I'm paying attention to
Yeah.
a lot of stuff, and sometimes there will be multiple facilitators in the room, and sometimes there's only one. When there's only one, it really helps to have that help.
Is there a quick tip in terms of like how to bring the introverts? Because it's like I'm not afraid normally to speak, but it's like I also realize that like I think you want other people that aren't
Yeah.
necessarily as inclined to speak up. So like any tips on like how to bring them in a little bit more?
Yeah, the single best way to do it, I think, is to use an approach that I always called "shut up and write." But in the book Sprint, which is about the design sprint, they call it working alone together. And it's a similar sort of thing, which is essentially when we start to think about a problem, the first thing we want to do is give people time to think about what they think. Which this is where extroverts, and I'm extroverted too, or I'm kind of both, but I can just talk my way through a problem if you just turn me on. And the other people's brains don't work like that. Like they get scattered. They need time to slow down and think about what they think. But I think it's beneficial no matter who, for us all to write down what we think. And then the process simply is go around the room and ask everybody to share what they wrote down.
Yeah.
And we really want them to share what they wrote versus being influenced by whoever talked first. Because what inevitably happens is if somebody talks first, it leads the rest of the discussion.
Agreed.
People jump on, they either agree or disagree with whatever that point was.
And
we don't
whatever the group's response to is like people are like, oh, I
Exactly.
don't want to share.
And if 4 people are really engaged and jumping in and they don't ever pause, then the other 20 people that might be quieter or more introverted never have a chance in. So it's really as simple as that. We want to give them space to think about what they think, write that down, and then be sure that we invite them in. And that's our job as a facilitator too, is to make sure that we pull them into the discussion. And one more tactical thing is I do think time boxing helps. If we say, okay, we've got a lot of people in the room and we've only got an hour, that means really everybody's got 90 seconds. I would hope it's more than that, but sometimes it's not, to be able to share their parts. Or everybody's going to share, but we're going to just spend 5 minutes on each person's thoughts. When you time box it, now when I need to, some people might end early, but if they're running long and we need to wrap them up, it's established already. It's not, okay, I'm going to cut off you because you're talking too much. It's, that's just the rules. It's the expectations of the room
Yeah.
that everybody is time boxed equally so that everybody's voices are heard equally. And that's a really important.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love it. Tim, we're at time. Anything final that you'd like to share?
No, and I know I can't believe that went by so fast, but there's a lot to cover. I just think the last thing that I say is really the title of why people might have joined was how to make meetings or workshops that don't suck. And facilitation is the answer. I like to say facilitation is like pizza. Even when it's bad, it's pretty good. So it's better than not having a facilitator. This is a skill people get better with the more they do it. So just keep trying it. I think you read somebody's comment earlier where they talked about doing it and then learning. I'm missing the full context of that quote, but that's how it works is every session we facilitate, you learn something from and you apply it to get better and stronger next time. And I just encourage people to go out and build that skill
I love it.
and try it. That's how we get there.
Yeah. Everybody that's on, thank you for joining.